My family had gathered in the grand, oak-paneled hall of Grandpa's old estate, the kind of place where the floors creaked in all the right places, and the chandeliers reflected decades of legacy. Everyone was there, smiling, laughing, toasting with crystal glasses, basking in the visible riches of the will. Everyone except me, who stood near the window, fingers twisting nervously around a tiny slip of paper. That slip had a phone number. That was my inheritance. My cousins were talking about yachts, stock options, and international accounts, while my brother Garrett was already planning renovations for his new house. I, meanwhile, had only this number in my hand and a knot in my stomach. Aunt Marlene leaned toward Uncle James, whispering, her eyes constantly flicking in my direction. My mother adjusted her pearl necklace, offering her familiar polite smile to the guests. But I could sense it, the subtle tension behind her calm facade, the tiny quiver of guilt when she glanced at me. They had all received tangible wealth. I had been given a riddle, a phone number. The curiosity was unbearable. I tucked the note into my jacket and stepped out onto the balcony, letting the sounds of the party fade. The city lights sparkled below like fragments of promise I wasn't supposed to reach. I dialed the number slowly. Each beep of the keypad echoed my heartbeat. On the third ring, a voice answered, firm, measured, yet calm. "Hello, is this Emily?" the voice asked. "Yes, this is me," I replied cautiously. "My name is Thomas," he said. "Your grandfather left instructions for you. He believed you were the only one capable of understanding the full scope of his plans." Confusion, frustration, curiosity, all collided inside me. Thomas explained that he was Grandpa's personal liaison for discrete matters, investments, trusts, partnerships, things invisible to the average eye, but crucial for true legacy. Grandpa had designed this final test carefully. Those who celebrated the obvious millions had missed the hidden web of influence and strategy he had built over decades. And I? I held the key, in the form of this mysterious phone call. I met Thomas at a small office in a quiet part of the city. It looked ordinary, but inside, folders and files hinted at the vast empire Grandpa had constructed behind the scenes. Thomas handed me a stack of documents, letters, and ledgers. At first glance, they seemed unremarkable, but as I sifted through, a pattern emerged. Hidden trusts, charitable funds, undisclosed partnerships, all pointing to a grand design that my family had overlooked. I realized Grandpa had never intended the visible fortune to define true inheritance. It was my ability to understand, to navigate, and to act that mattered. I spent hours examining every file, connecting dots that had been invisible to everyone else. Each revelation brought a surge of empowerment. I could feel Grandpa's presence in the details, the way he had accounted for human nature, greed, and short-sightedness. My family had celebrated the surface, but the depth lay with me. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, documents spread across the floor. I considered the choices ahead. I could act quietly, letting the hidden assets grow and serve the intended purposes. Or I could reveal the truth immediately, risking chaos in the family. I realized Grandpa's test wasn't about wealth. It was about judgment, discretion, and character. Over the next few weeks, I began the work he had entrusted to me. I reached out to trusted partners, clarified intentions, secured investments, and began mapping out the hidden legacy. Every call, every meeting, every decision reinforced what Grandpa had known. The true power lay not in what is seen, but in understanding what others overlook. Meanwhile, the family continued their celebrations, oblivious to the layers beneath. They discussed property, vacations, and accounts, unaware that the real fortune was not a number in a bank, but a carefully orchestrated network of influence, knowledge, and strategic opportunity. I moved quietly, learning the rhythm of the hidden empire, testing boundaries, and discovering the extent of the responsibilities Grandpa had left in my hands. Then came an unexpected complication. A distant relative, curious about my activities, began asking questions. I realized that even secrecy carried risks. My ability to navigate the delicate balance between transparency and discretion would be tested. I had to anticipate their moves, understand their motivations, and act before any leaks could unravel the careful structure Grandpa had left intact. As weeks passed, I gained confidence. Each step revealed more of the depth of Grandpa's foresight. I discovered investments in sustainable projects, educational funds for communities, and partnerships in ventures designed to foster innovation. Each document was a lesson in strategy, patience, and human psychology. I understood why he had chosen me. I saw patterns, anticipated reactions, and thought long-term. My family's millions were fleeting. The real legacy was sustainable, far-reaching, and intangible. Finally, the moment of reckoning arrived. I decided it was time to confront the family, not with accusations, but with truth. I presented them with evidence, documents, and explanations. The initial shock was palpable. Eyes widened, voices faltered, and some tried to deflect responsibility. But the narrative I had built, based on clarity and proof, was undeniable. The celebration of visible wealth faded into the realization that the true inheritance, the network, the foresight, the influence, was mine to steward. As the dust settled, I felt a profound mixture of vindication, responsibility, and awe. Grandpa had entrusted me with more than assets. He had entrusted me with purpose, strategy, and a test of character. The phone number, once a source of incredulity, had been a key to a universe of unseen opportunities. And as I looked at my family, still processing, I understood that true legacy is not measured by what people can see, but by the depth of understanding, the patience to act wisely, and the courage to step beyond expectation. The journey wasn't over. With every decision, every choice, every strategic move, I honored Grandpa's vision. I became not just a beneficiary, but a guardian of knowledge, influence, and ethical power. The millions celebrated by others paled in comparison to the responsibility and potential I now held, and I knew with certainty that this journey, begun with a single mysterious phone number, would shape my life, my family, and the impact I could have on the world in ways far beyond the reach of any simple inheritance. The following days after the confrontation with my family were nothing short of surreal. I returned to my small apartment, yet every corner of the city felt alive with secrets and connections I had only begun to comprehend. Thomas, Grandpa's liaison, had given me access to secure accounts, encrypted messages, and confidential dossiers. The sheer scale of what I was entrusted with made my head spin, but also ignited a fierce determination within me. Every document told a story. Every ledger hinted at strategies no one else had seen. I realized my family had celebrated tangible wealth, yachts, cars, and properties, while the invisible empire, the legacy Grandpa had carefully built, was now mine to steward. I spent late nights cross-referencing files, tracing transactions, and mapping the network Grandpa had left behind. It wasn't just about money. It was about influence, foresight, and understanding human nature on a level most people never reached. As I worked, I kept imagining Grandpa's meticulous mind, the way he had anticipated each family member's greed, their short-sightedness, and their reliance on surface appearances. The more I uncovered, the more I understood the test he had set. It was a test of character, patience, and judgment. Every time a new piece of the puzzle fell into place, I felt a mix of awe and responsibility. I reached out to the lawyers, accountants, and distant partners Grandpa had trusted and began negotiating quietly, making adjustments to protect the intent of his legacy. Each interaction was a delicate balance. I had to assert authority without revealing too much, move forward without creating suspicion, and remain vigilant against those who might exploit any perceived weakness. Meanwhile, my family carried on with their celebrations, unaware that the true wealth, the network, the foresight, and the power, was beyond their grasp. Garrett, my brother, continued planning renovations on his new property, boasting about the estate he thought he controlled. Aunt Marlene hosted luncheons, subtly undermining my efforts by insinuating that I was meddling or overreaching. Yet, they didn't understand that what Grandpa had left me wasn't about tangible assets alone. It was about insight, strategy, and discretion. Then came the first major challenge. A corporate partner contacted me regarding an investment Grandpa had initiated years prior. There was a potential legal issue that, if mishandled, could expose vulnerabilities in the entire network. I had to navigate complex financial instruments, legal regulations, and interpersonal politics simultaneously. Each decision carried weight, not just for me, but for the intent of the inheritance. I realized that managing Grandpa's legacy was akin to walking a tightrope above a city of shifting sands. One misstep could collapse the structure he had spent decades perfecting. The weeks turned into months. I developed systems to monitor accounts, track communications, and evaluate risks. I built a digital archive that allowed me to anticipate problems before they arose. I communicated with Thomas daily, dissecting every new piece of information, running scenarios, and testing contingencies. One afternoon, an unexpected email arrived, a threat disguised as a casual inquiry from a distant cousin who had somehow learned of my involvement. The message was polite, almost jovial, yet hinted at knowledge that could jeopardize the delicate balance I had been maintaining. I spent hours analyzing it, tracing digital fingerprints, and cross-referencing prior communications. It was a reminder that secrecy and discretion were essential, that the smallest slip could unravel everything. That evening, I reflected on how Grandpa's vision was more than financial mastery. It was a test of resilience, foresight, and adaptability. He had designed this legacy so that only someone capable of navigating ambiguity, human deception, and complex strategy could truly steward it. I had been chosen because I saw patterns, anticipated behaviors, and acted deliberately rather than impulsively. Days blurred into weeks. I managed to stabilize several of Grandpa's hidden investments, preventing potential collapses, and securing the charitable funds he had earmarked for education and community support. I reached out to community leaders, verifying their intentions and ensuring that the funds would be used effectively. Each successful negotiation reinforced my confidence. Each minor victory reminded me why Grandpa had trusted me over others who seemed so eager to claim the obvious riches. The family, meanwhile, continued to speculate and boast. They asked about accounts, questioned decisions, and occasionally tried to probe my knowledge. But I remained calm, giving just enough information to satisfy their curiosity without revealing the true extent of my authority. One evening, during a family dinner, my mother asked casually about my progress. I responded vaguely, citing minor administrative updates. Her eyes flickered with suspicion, but she said nothing further. I knew that maintaining the illusion of inexperience or limitation was crucial. A single misstep, a hint of overconfidence, could trigger resentment or interference. By the following month, I had successfully brought several hidden ventures online, transforming abstract documents into functioning systems with clear objectives and measurable impact. I worked with partners across industries, education, sustainable energy, technology, and philanthropy. Grandpa's foresight became evident in the way each investment was structured to thrive independently, yet contribute to a greater cohesive legacy. Despite the progress, challenges arose almost daily. Unexpected market shifts, new legal inquiries, and occasional probing questions from family members required constant vigilance. Each decision tested my patience and strategic acumen. I realized that Grandpa's choice to leave me only a phone number initially was genius. It forced me to prove initiative, judgment, and resilience before I could access the true potential of his legacy. Late at night, I would often sit alone in the office, reviewing the day's developments, reflecting on my choices, and planning the next steps. Sometimes, the weight of responsibility was overwhelming, and doubt crept in, yet I reminded myself that this was exactly what Grandpa intended. The measure of true inheritance was not the money itself, but the capacity to steward it wisely, ethically, and strategically. Then came the first critical confrontation. A distant cousin, curious and ambitious, sought to leverage my position to gain access to a particular trust. I invited them for a meeting, presenting options, risks, and consequences. The conversation was tense, filled with subtle power plays and indirect threats masked as polite discussion. I had to maintain authority while avoiding confrontation that could trigger family conflict or legal complications. I felt a thrill of clarity as I navigated the negotiation. Each careful word, each pause, each strategic silence was deliberate. By the end of the meeting, the cousin had agreed to follow the boundaries I set. This was more than management. It was psychological mastery, a lesson in influence, and a testament to Grandpa's selection of me. The months that followed were a blur of activity. I consolidated funds, monitored charitable projects, refined investment strategies, and slowly, meticulously, integrated myself as the guardian of Grandpa's vision. Each day brought new discoveries, small victories, and occasional setbacks that demanded careful navigation. The family continued their celebrations, oblivious to the unseen empire I had been cultivating. They assumed I was idle, distracted, or incompetent, but the reality was that every action I took preserved the integrity of the legacy Grandpa had left behind. And through it all, I learned that true inheritance is not what is visible or measurable by wealth alone. It is about foresight, strategic thinking, judgment, and ethical stewardship. It is about patience, insight, and understanding human nature at its most subtle and complex. I had been entrusted with more than money. I had been entrusted with wisdom, influence, and the responsibility to ensure that Grandpa's vision was honored and executed with precision. The final stage of my journey began with a realization that Grandpa's vision was more intricate than I had ever imagined. The hidden trusts, charitable foundations, and business ventures were only part of a much larger puzzle. I discovered private correspondences, encrypted notes, and coded instructions that revealed his intentions went far beyond financial inheritance. They were lessons in leadership, ethics, and human psychology. Every step I took had to be deliberate. Missteps could not only unravel the delicate structure I had built, but also risked exposure to those family members who had begun sensing my competence. The morning after reviewing a set of encrypted letters, I met with Thomas at a quiet cafe in the city. "This is the last piece," he said, sliding a thin envelope across the table. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside were detailed instructions for distributing assets in a way that would benefit not just our family, but communities, schools, and emerging entrepreneurs. It was a blueprint of foresight, designed to test patience, judgment, and discretion. The enormity of responsibility pressed down on me. I spent hours analyzing every directive, cross-referencing legal frameworks, financial implications, and ethical considerations. I realized that Grandpa had anticipated every possible outcome, every potential conflict, every human flaw. I had been chosen not because of wealth, but because of my capacity to comprehend complexity, maintain integrity, and execute with precision. I began contacting the various trustees and administrators, explaining my role carefully. I avoided triggering suspicion, ensuring that each step aligned with Grandpa's instructions. Conversations were delicate dances of authority and subtlety. Some trustees tested me, probing for mistakes or weakness, but I remained composed, responding with clarity and patience. Slowly, the hidden network came to life. Charitable projects were activated, investments optimized, and strategic partnerships solidified. Each success reinforced the realization that the true inheritance was not the millions my family celebrated, but the knowledge, influence, and ethical stewardship that Grandpa had meticulously orchestrated. At the same time, my family continued their own narrative, believing the fortune they had celebrated was the ultimate legacy. I let them, knowing that their focus on immediate gratification and surface wealth contrasted sharply with the depth and sustainability of the inheritance I was managing. One afternoon, a distant cousin sent a message implying they had discovered part of the hidden network. The words were casual, almost playful, yet carried a threat. I understood immediately that I had to respond with both tact and authority. A meeting was scheduled, and I presented the cousin with an outline of Grandpa's expectations, carefully demonstrating the importance of discretion and ethical management. Their expressions shifted from amusement to apprehension as they realized the depth of the responsibilities and oversight involved. That night, alone in my office, I reflected on the journey. Grandpa's legacy had forced me to grow, strategically, ethically, emotionally. I had learned to anticipate human behavior, navigate complex structures, and exercise patience. Wealth was superficial. Influence, wisdom, and integrity were enduring. As the months progressed, the network I managed began to show tangible outcomes. Schools received funding for innovative programs, young entrepreneurs were supported with seed investments, and community initiatives thrived under careful guidance. I witnessed the ripple effects of each decision, reinforcing the notion that true legacy is measured not by possession, but by impact. Occasionally, family members inquired about progress, but I offered only enough to satisfy curiosity, maintaining the integrity of the larger plan. They could see surface results, but the hidden depth remained untouched, safeguarded by strategy and foresight. Then, the unexpected happened. A former business associate of Grandpa's reached out, claiming a claim to part of the network. The situation demanded legal, financial, and interpersonal strategy simultaneously. I spent days crafting a response, consulting with Thomas, and reviewing every possible outcome. The resolution was delicate but successful. The claimant recognized the oversight of their own assumptions, reinforcing my authority and the robustness of Grandpa's design. Every challenge reaffirmed that Grandpa's final test was about character and judgment, not luck or money. With each victory, I gained confidence and insight, and the full scale of the legacy became apparent. I realized the journey was not just about safeguarding assets, but about mastering influence, strategy, and ethical leadership. I also began documenting the process, creating a manual that could guide future generations, ensuring that Grandpa's lessons extended beyond a single lifetime. Months turned into a year, and the hidden network had matured under careful stewardship. I had succeeded not by force or confrontation, but through patience, foresight, and judicious action. The family slowly began to recognize that the narrative they had celebrated was only a fraction of the truth, that the true power lay in understanding, execution, and vision. I hosted a small gathering, bringing family members together to showcase the network's impact. Eyes widened as they saw schools thriving, communities supported, and entrepreneurs flourishing. It was subtle, but effective. No one could claim it had been handed to me. It was a culmination of understanding and diligence. Finally, in a quiet moment, I sat in Grandpa's old study, reflecting on the journey. The phone number that had once seemed insignificant had unlocked a universe of responsibility, insight, and legacy. I felt a profound gratitude, not just for the opportunity, but for the lessons embedded in every challenge, every decision, and every interaction. Grandpa's foresight had transformed me. The inheritance was not static. It was alive, requiring engagement, intelligence, and ethical judgment. I understood now that true wealth is not measured by what can be counted or displayed, but by the capacity to act with wisdom, influence, and integrity. And as I gazed at the documents, letters, and files that represented decades of strategy, I knew that my role was clear: to be the steward, guardian, and executor of a legacy designed to outlast generations. This understanding changed me fundamentally. The millions celebrated by my family were ephemeral. The real inheritance, the intricate, ethically grounded, strategically constructed network, was enduring, alive, and demanding. I had been tested, I had grown, and I had proven that I was worthy. And so the story concludes, but the work continues. Every decision, every conversation, every strategic move now carries the weight of Grandpa's vision. I am not just a beneficiary of wealth, I am a guardian of wisdom, influence, and legacy. The journey that began with a single, mysterious phone number has transformed a simple inheritance into a lifetime of responsibility, insight, and purpose, teaching me that true power is earned through understanding, patience, and ethical action.